So I thought I'd do some post hoc comments about my trip. So one thing that I did do is I did charge at a few places where I didn't actually need to, and that's because I haven't done this trip before. So I didn't really know what kind of range that I would get. So in a couple of cases I stopped at Waiouru, I stopped at Turangi. I didn't think I actually needed to stop at Turangi any times at all. So sometimes, you just stop because you're not really sure. So I definitely stopped and bought lunch, I think, or some snacks or something, going in both directions at Turangi. Turangi is just one of those big stops which has got a supermarket and a petrol station and all the facilities. So, that's a good place to stop and get a cup of coffee. If you're going to stop anyway, you may as well plug in the car, because that means that when you get to the next location, because it's a few percent more battery charge, so that it'll save you time later. So one approach is to use even fast chargers as convenience chargers. If you know you're taking a long journey, then every time you stop you may as well plug in the car and recharge it. On the other hand, I think the car actually charges much faster when the battery is very flat. So topping up the battery at fast charger is not a good idea, because it actually just costs you more money than if you charge it later. So, that's interesting. In this trip, I stayed at my brother's house a couple of nights, and I could have recharged at his house, but because the Taupo fast charger was free and I was making a video, and my video was primarily about just using the car and how to use it, I didn't charge at my brother's house. I used a fast charger. Next time I take this trip, the chances are that they'll turn on pricing for that fast charger, in which case I would just recharge overnight at my brother's house, because that costs far less. It's about 17 cents per kilowatt hour charging on night rates, as opposed to 25 cents per kilowatt hour on a fast charger, perhaps 40 cents per kilowatt hour depending on what scheme. I don't know what the pricing scheme is going to be. So far the fast chargers I've used are 25 cents per kilowatt and 25 cents per minute, or 40 cents per kilowatt. So the one I used at Rotorua was 40 cents per kilowatt. And so what I tended to do was stay plugged in much longer than I otherwise would have, because you're just paying for the power, and quite often it's just convenient to have the battery quite full, especially if you're taking journeys you haven't had before and you don't know how much power you're going to use for that journey. So I kind of think that I made a spreadsheet in this case, so I might print that out and keep it in the car, so next time I make the journey I'll know how much charge to put in to make each segment. So another thing I worked out is that in my car I can't drive from my house to Mangaweka, but I can drive from Mangaweka to my house. That's because it's sort of uphill towards Mangaweka, and so I'll just use more battery too fast to do that journey. But on the other way, I'm going downhill, so it actually preserves the battery considerably all the way until you get to Bulls. I only used like 30% of the battery to do that part of the journey, because it was mostly downhill, and then the other 60 odd percent of the battery I had left would have been enough to get me home, or at least to the Otaki fast charger. But around the other way, because my car I tried charging at Otaki on the way up, but because the battery was too full, it wouldn't charge very quickly. It was very expensive to charge that way. Perhaps if they had a different pricing scheme or a slow charger somewhere, that would be a better idea. But until they put a fast charger at Sanson or at Bulls, then I'll have to go north, going via Palmerston North. Even though it's not that much, it only made like a something 20-minute difference to the drive going north, and I do tend to. I stop a lot when I'm driving anyway. I just can't sit in the car for long periods of time. Any car tends to kind of just get uncomfortable. Yeah, I just need a break, and I like to stop and get a coffee and have a walk around, that kind of thing. So great car if that's your travelling style. However, if you're the kind of person who gets in the car, drives non-stop for 5 hours, electric car's probably not really for you at this stage. If you hit a 24 kilowatt Nissan LEAF, because remember my car is 30 kilowatt, which is the unusually large battery for a Nissan LEAF. A normal 24 kilowatt Nissan LEAF, you can do this whole journey that I did, but you would have to be very careful driving from Palmerston North to Mangaweka. You would have to, you wouldn't want a headwind, that might be a bit of a pain, and you would have to charge to 100% in Palmerston North. So currently I wouldn't really recommend driving a normal Nissan LEAF from Palmerston North to Mangaweka. I don't think you would be guaranteed of getting there every time, because I left on 80% from Palmerston North, and I got to Mangaweka on 8%, and I had to slow down because I was a little bit concerned. So probably 8% should still get you a reasonable distance, but let me try and think that out. 10% would be 3 kilowatts, so 8% is less. So if we say 3 kilowatts and then go 6, that's 18 kilometers. So you're actually looking at around 16 kilometers of range left, which is really getting low. So definitely, if you're driving from Palmerston North to Mangaweka, you need to do a max charge at Palmerston North, and then drive carefully. I went via the Sanson way, which is flat. I think you can drive via Fielding, which will take you through the big dip, because you've got to drive effectively through down into the Mangaweka, not the Mangaweka, what is that river called? Ruapehu River, I think. You have to drive down into the Ruapehu River and then back out. Feel like I'm saying the wrong word there. Bit of geography tech. Anyway, so that's a tricky drive in a Nissan LEAF. I think that if you had any other BMW i3 or a Kia Soul or a Renault Zoe, well, Renault Zoe's got a different problem because it uses three-phase charging, and there's no three-phase charging available at most fast charge locations, so don't take the Renault Zoe. Well, you can, but you have to charge somewhere else. I don't know where you would charge that. EV Central in Taupo has a slow charger, so you can charge there if you like as well, so that's kind of handy. Again, as more people get electric cars, there should be more chargers become available. For example, they're building a double up charger, so ChargeNet fast charger being built on the Taupo bypass road. So that will mean that Taupo will have 3 fast chargers, and I'm going to guess that the Taupo City fast charger will have the 40 cents per unit charge, and the other ones will be the 25 cents per unit charge. Mostly for driving style, I wasn't trying to drive conservatively slowly, although some places I just did drive conservatively slowly because I was a little bit worried about the range. And this is crazy because a 24 kilowatt LEAF should easily get between these places that I drove. Not in all cases though. So yeah, it makes it a hard recommended 24 kilowatt LEAF. I think that if you live places where you live halfway between 2 fast chargers, and so the fast charge, the one that's either side of your house are only going to be about 40 kilometers away, then a 24 kilowatt Nissan LEAF is probably really awesome, because you can get sufficiently far away and use the fast charger if you need it, and not use it if you don't need it. But on the other hand, just for electric cars in general, definitely 30 kilowatts is a marginally short distance, I think. So my overall feeling for this is that the the totally practical electric cars that can replace your everyday car would be the 40 kilowatt cars and bigger. So, like I think my longest driving segment was about 120 kilometers, and I've driven 120 kilometers one or two times before, and it's fine if you're going past a lot of charges and you can plug in at any stage. But if you're driving 124 kilometers in the countryside and there's not really any charging infrastructure available to you, then my car probably has a real highway range of around 160 kilometers, but getting down to your last 35 kilometers or something like that, it starts to get a little bit uncomfortable because you're not really certain whether you're going to make it to the next charging stop. Another thing to do when you take a long drive is go on the app and make sure that the fast chargers along your journey are online and actually working. The other day I was just driving up to Palmerston North, and I drove past the Otaki fast charger and it had a fault, and there was a guy there who was just sitting at the charger and he couldn't recharge his car, and so he had to call for service. And then somebody said that maybe that charging problem didn't get resolved that day. So I don't know what you would do in that case. You're either going to get your car towed to another city, that's going to be really expensive. In my car insurance, the breakdown service would cover that. And if you have those sorts of extra things in your insurance, it's quite possible that insurance might even cover a night in a motel if you were in a location that you just couldn't get towed from. So that's an interesting thing. On the other hand, once there are sufficient large numbers of chargers that each town or village has a couple of fast chargers, then you're going to have no problem. If you can't recharge at one end of town, just drive your car to the other side of the town, a couple of kilometres away, there'll be another fast charger. So already that's the case in Auckland. There's so many chargers all over the place that unless you've just let your battery get down to super low level, you're going to have a problem getting to another charger. But if you're recharging your car, when you've still got 30% left, then you've got 30 kilometers to drive to another charger. That's not going to be a problem. Some other locations. If Levin had a fast charger, for example, that would be real handy, because I think that driving from Levin to Mangaweka might be possible, or Foxton to Mangaweka, that would be possible for me and my car. Different ranges for different people. I think that anywhere driving that's really hilly is just more tricky, because I think when I drove to Masterton for a day trip, and I don't know how much range that was, something like 250 kilometers, and I recharged the car 2 times, once in Masterton and again on the way back in Upper Hutt, because going over big mountains just uses a lot of energy. It's good that you get back some of the energy going downhill on the other side. So if you can get to the crest of a mountain, you're all right to get down the other side. You can regen enough power to get to a charger on the other side. That's good. I use 28% of my battery. So in a normal Nissan LEAF, you would use, say, 40% of your battery to drive from Ohakune up to the ski field. That's a kilometre of vertical altitude. So large amounts of vertical altitude use a lot of power. Going from sea level, like you would be at near Levin or Foxton or Bulls, up to the crest of the desert road, you're looking at more than a kilometre. I think it's about a kilometre 60 metres, something like that. So you just use a lot of energy to get to the high country. So this is going to be the case in the South Island. You're going to be going over these mountain passes as well. So you actually need considerably larger battery for getting up hills, but again, you regen a bit of power on the way down. If you can get over a hill, you're fine. I think they're totally practical. I think for a completely mainstream electric car in New Zealand, 40 kilowatt cars would be sufficient for almost everybody. So, for example, if I had a 40 kilowatt car, I could drive from my house to Mangaweka. So my take on it is that it takes about 10 kilowatts to climb 1 kilometer of altitude. So, you know, if you're driving around in big hills, then that's tricky. So there's a couple of places in New Zealand which have hills around 1 kilometer of altitude. I think there's say going between Gisborne and Whakatane, that's about nearing 1 kilometre, and the road between, I'm going to say, Matamata across to Tauranga, it gets pretty high as well. And in Thames, going from Thames over to the other side of the Coromandel Peninsula, that's, I think, 700-800 metres, something like that. Lindis Pass is pretty high, so quite a lot of the South Island mountain passes are around that. So effectively you need whatever you need to cover the normal distance plus an additional 10 kilowatts to lift the weight of the car over the hill. That is tricky. Yeah, I found that. See, Waiouru's at about 600 meters, so you go from Waiouru to the top of the hill. That's going from 600 up to 10.06, and then you go downhill the other side back to Turangi, which is pretty close to lake level, which is about 300 meters. So you actually going from Waiouru to Turangi uses less power than going to Turangi to Waiouru because you're gaining altitude. Then once you're past Waiouru, you start going downhill again, either towards Ohakune or downhill towards... no, Ohakune's not too much lower downhill. Yeah, so from Waiouru you go downhill to Mangaweka, but the area around Mangaweka is really hilly with some really huge climbs. I mean, some of those have big steep hill climbs that go for 2 or 3 kilometers at a time. So those 1, 2 or 3 kilometers at a time, they're big hill climbs. So that just uses a lot of power.